Hello English 10, it's Miss Long here, and congratulations on watching this video. Not all weekly updates are as essential as perhaps this one is in terms of avoiding misunderstandings and knowing what you're going to do this week. So let me take a couple moments to walk you through what this session looks like. Now just to review, we are looking at short story. This is Unit 8 on short story. And we have 4 assignments that are required this week. And those assignments will help you to better delve into some sample mentor texts, some sample short stories, before you write your own in session 3 and 4. So that's where we're headed. That's the important piece here. The work ethic, as has been the case before, is optional. But the first thing beyond that you're going to do is select 2 short stories from this list. There's a variety of genres here, variety of reading levels here, varieties of types of lengths, short stories. So you're going to pick 2 that really resonate with you, that interest you in some fashion, and those will be your mentor texts. Now, as you read, you're going to be noticing literary devices, things like flashback and foreshadowing, figurative language, and you're going to pay attention to distinctive word choices, because those will help you in these 2 assignments and also in better understanding what makes an effective short story. So do choose carefully, choose stories that are interesting and appropriately challenging for you. After you have chosen the stories, you're going to be contributing to a class wiki. And you have seen these before. These are websites online where people can contribute information. You should all have editing rights, including the BOCES students from Southwest Colorado eSchool. Let me know if somehow I missed adding your email address. But you should have the access to come in here and add some information about the types of literary devices you found in your short story. So there's an example here under conflicts that will show you how you can present information about your short story, present the literary device, and explain how this literary device is effective. And you're going to choose 3 to 4 from your 2 short stories, and you're going to post in these little categories here. So that will be your first way of processing the short stories that you have read in this short story selection. Now, if you need some information on how to post, there's a video here that can walk you through that process. It is from last year, but the instructions are basically the same. So your second assignment using those short stories will be listing word choices that are particularly powerful and particularly strong. You'll take a look at concrete nouns, vivid verbs, active adjectives, powerful adjectives. In other words, very specific words that the author has chosen to use instead of the more commonly used words. And you're going to take those word choices and either list them here as a discussion post, or you can create a word cloud for 15 points of extra credit. So if you choose to do the word cloud, you have a couple of resources here that you can use. You can use actually anything that will let you create a word cloud, but there's a couple of options here. And you'll make a word cloud with those 10 to 15 words that you've chosen. Just an option for extra credit. The next assignment that you're going to do will have you look at stylistic choices and narrative techniques. These are ways that authors make short stories, create short stories that are particularly engaging for readers. So one thing that short story writers do is have strong narrative hooks. And there are some tips on this page on how you can get your reader to read your story and not give up after the first few lines. So you'll have a video here to look at and a different list of ways to begin and ways not to begin. You'll also take a look at convincing dialogue, because your final short story should use some type of dialogue. And you'll want to remember tips like show and don't tell. You can convey attitudes by describing the character's actions, facial expression, tone. You want to sound like real people, even if you use dialect, like what we had in A Raisin in the Sun. You want to show hesitations. You'll want to show pauses. You'll want to have action interspersed with the dialogue. And if you choose a third-person omniscient point of view, you may be able to add the character's feelings and thoughts as you're presenting that person's dialogue. So some tips here for you to remember on dialogue. And then you'll look at different ways that those narrative techniques involve breaking standard English, breaking the rules of standard English, like using italics, making paragraphs that aren't really full paragraphs, intentional fragments and run-ons where you're trying to capture the person's voice. So these are all ways you break standard English for the purpose of creating a very strong character that the reader can connect with. And once you are familiar with some of these choices and narrative techniques, you're going to see how they were applied in a fairly modern mentor text short story. It's a short story written by a guy who is 37 years old, ancient little guy here. Actually, he looks awfully bald to be 37. Anyway, this short story is here. It's a short story called Halloween, and the author is trying to sound like a 17-year-old or 16-year-old high school sophomore boy. And so he is using broken English or fragments, some of these different stylistic devices to do that. So your response is to say, how well did he pull it off? My experience is students either love this story or they hate this story. So find out which one you are by reading it in this session. And you'll submit that as your assignment, the third assignment for this session. So from there, your last thing to do in this session will be to write in your weekly journal with a familiar story. You're going to tell a brief story. You're going to write up a brief story. It can be something of true life that happened to you, maybe the one that you had in your journal in session 1, or you can use a very familiar story, short story or fairy tale, like retell the story of Little Red Riding Hood, Emperor's New Clothes, Three Little Pigs, and make an effort to use one of these techniques or stylistic choices. So you'll make the effort as you're telling the story to get a clear narrative hook, or you'll make the effort to use really convincing dialogue as you retell the story, or you'll practice some stylistic departures from standard English. Do let me know which one you're aiming for so that I can give you feedback on that. Have enough details in the story I can respond. And this will give you some practice at using those different techniques and choices before you get to your short story. And that will more or less wrap up our week. Next week, as you get into short story, we will begin planning your own short story. And you'll write that up and share that with other people in our class. That's where we're headed. Not much time left. I think my kids calculated like 23 days or, no, 17 days left of school. Nobody's counting. Yeah, we are. Busy time. Please feel free to reach out when you have questions, and have yourself an awesome week.